I think the administration's attempt to stabilize the market, while well-intentioned, has resulted in dragging out the foreclosure process, and there's still a fairly large backlog of foreclosures yet to come through the system. The most important thing is that people who would normally come into a distressed market and make an investment don't really know that we've hit the bottom yet. And until we hit the bottom and price discovery takes place and people say we really are at a point where it makes sense to put capital at risk, there's a lot of players in the sidelines. To the extent that we simply let the foreclosure process run its course, particularly with people who did investments in properties to flip them or for investment properties to essentially profit from them, if we just let those clear, I think we'll hit the bottom and bounce off much more quickly, particularly in some of the states like Florida, California, that have had just a tremendous problem with foreclosures.
Mm-hmm. We also hear, Jim, see what how you respond to this. That when we work our way through the private housing market, that there could be a problem in the future with commercial properties, and that we could be going through the same thing all over again with commercial properties. Is that true? What do you foresee in regard to that market?
Well, I think the issues with commercial real estate are very real, and we are experiencing them both in the Commonwealth as well as throughout the U.S. The housing market has kind of led the downturn, and the commercial real estate market is now under the same degree of stress that we saw in the initial stages of the housing industry. So we've really got to clear the residential housing market out while we are still contending with some issues in the commercial real estate side of the business. So one of the things that's making, I think, it difficult in some cases for people to to borrow money either for a new home or for commercial real estate is just the sense that we haven't hit the bottom and we still have a lot of potential downside in both these markets.
Well, we have just witnessed a little while ago one of the most remarkable elections in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've seen a Republican win a U.S. Senate seat up there, of course, the former seat, the seat that was formerly held by Senator Kennedy. Scott Brown won that, and this brings into question perhaps the president's economic strategy and policy strategy. I guess I'd like to ask you, if you had the opportunity to advise President Obama today as to how we could set the economy on a sustained course of recovery, what steps would you recommend that the president take to have a robust national economy?
Well, that's a pretty tall order. So
yeah, I'm sorry, Jim.
Let me take a crack at that,
okay.
though. I think the first thing we really have to look at is tax policy, and it is really beyond me how we are looking at increasing taxes, particularly on the personal side to consumers, when we already have a fairly deep recession and a pretty big issue with employment. So the $787 billion that was spent on stimulus really has not been effective. It's taken a lot of money out of people's pockets, and that has had a very negative effect on the economy. If I were looking at advising the president, the first thing is to really look at reducing the tax burden at the federal level on middle and low income taxpayers. And I appreciate his pledge, but the fact of the matter is there's all sorts of fees and taxes that are being assessed on this group, and a tax cut to that group would be pretty effective. The one thing I think the administration has done a good job on is the first-time homebuyer tax credit that's been extended to home buying in general. To the extent that you want people to absorb the inventory that's in foreclosure and to restore confidence, you've got to give the incentive to consumers to take the risk. And targeted tax credits for buying a home, whether it's a first-time home buyer or a trade-up buyer, make a lot of sense. So those are two areas I think that I would advise on. And then finally, the focus really has to be on job creation. And job creation occurs when businesses have confidence in the economy and confidence in the environment. we've had really a year of just a whole series of very ill-defined policies and very grandiose schemes, from healthcare to cap and trade to just all kinds of government spending that has created a drag on investment. And if we want that investment to continue and to pick up, we've really got to create certainty, which means limit the size of the government, limit the programs, and focus on employment.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, your bank is entitled American Home Bank. Is this a good time to buy a home?
I think that if you're looking at a modest home or a first-time home buying opportunity, affordability has been great. Interest rates are still in a very favorable levels. The ability to buy a home with as little as 5% down still exists. And if you're looking at living in a home over the course of 5 to 10 years, real estate's a long-term investment. You can't buy it today and hope to make money in 2 weeks or even 2 months. You've got to hold over the long term. But over the long term, real estate has been a pretty durable investment. It's one in which you can live in while it appreciates. And I would think that over the next 5 years, that people who buy in the next 4, 5, 6 months, 5 years from now, are going to look back and say, that was a pretty good time to buy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you had a crystal ball, last question, if you had a crystal ball and you were going to predict what the state of the U.S. economy and the state economy might be at the end of 2010, we have a gubernatorial election coming up in Pennsylvania here in 2010. What do you foresee, Jim? If you're willing to go out on that ledge with me and try to take a peek at what we might be seeing.
Well, I think the lessons that were really taught in Massachusetts with respect to what voters want. They're concerned about employment, they're concerned about the level of deficit, and they're concerned about the load of taxes. And there's a sense that the average wage earner is suffering while the government bureaucracy bloats. That, I think, is going to be the theme that will go throughout 2010. There's so many issues with respect to the economy on the real estate side, the commercial real estate side, unemployment, that I do not think that the end of 2010 is going to be a very rosy picture either in the Commonwealth or in the U.S. We still have a ways to go through this. And for that reason, I'd probably bet more on the Republican side of this based on Massachusetts than not.
Yeah, certainly quite a remarkable election, and we're looking forward to the end of the year and hope that our economy will be remarkable as well. But thank you so much for your assessment and for joining us today.
Okay, Charlie,
we
thank you.
really appreciate it, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Behind the Headlines is a production of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, a nonpartisan, nonprofit research organization helping Pennsylvania build a brighter future.
And we'll see you next week with another edition of Behind the Headlines.